Hello and welcome. So this is the upgrade session. This is a kind of a replacement session that we put up. This is a two-part series. So this is the first part, obviously. And tomorrow we're going to have another session on upgrade, which will be a deep dive track. So I'm Chan, and I come from New Zealand. Traveled a wee bit far to get here. Fortunately, I was in Paris and I was able to get on Eurostar on Friday, so made it here in time. What do I do? I work for a company called Knowledge Q in New Zealand. I do training and consulting. And I also run some of the SharePoint user groups in New Zealand. So if you're heading down to New Zealand, how many of you have been to New Zealand? Quite a few. Cool. So next time, come and say hello. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about planning and guidance for getting ready for SharePoint 2010. What you need to do to get your servers, your users ready for 2010. What process do you need to follow? And some guidelines around best practices when you're going to 2010. The second part of the session, which Craig and I will do tomorrow, is we're going to go and actually do two upgrades. One using the database attach method and the in-place upgrade method, which I will talk about today a little bit more. So system requirements, if you haven't heard, you have to be 64-bit. I'm pretty sure everyone kind of knows this by now, but if you haven't, you have to be on 64-bit. So 2008 R2, also 2008. SQL 2005 is supported with Service Pack 3, I believe. Need to check on that one. So, that URL will give you all the sys requirements if you're interested in getting more detail on that. So when you talk about upgrade, there's a couple of things to kind of figure out. So are you going to move, which essentially means are you going to move your farm components to different hardware? Are you going to, as part of your upgrade from your current environment that you would go to, are you going to buy new hardware and then move your farm to new hardware? Are you going to migrate from 32-bit? Who has 32-bit based SharePoint environments here currently? None? Few? Okay, cool. We're going to cover quite a few of that. Upgrade, which essentially means when you're applying service packs or you're actually upgrading from 2007 to 2010, or from 2003 to 2007 to 2010. So the questions that I'll kind of cover today is I've got a 32-bit SharePoint farm, and I need to move that to migrate that to a 64-bit farm. What do I do? And I have a plan to move to 64-bit, but I don't know how. So I'll cover how a little bit. And I'm already on 64-bit, I want to upgrade. So you've already got a 2007 farm, which is on 64-bit, and you want to go to 2010. And there may be somebody who are newbies to SharePoint who wants to learn about it, yeah? And you might be wanting to start a new SharePoint 2010 project. So I'll cover some of the requirements and so forth. If you're using 2003, you'll need to go to 2007 in order to go to 2010. I'm not going to cover 2003, unfortunately, but I can point you to some material on how to migrate from 2003 to 2007. So one of the first things you obviously need to do is figure out within your deployment, what have you got? It's quite surprising when you go and visit clients that how many people actually don't know what they got in the environment. So one of the first things, if you are in 32-bit, you got to do is identify what servers you've got on 32-bit. Document them. If you haven't got documented procedures for your service accounts, how your SSPs are set up, how your search is configured, that kind of thing. MySATs are configured. You need to document that, so that will be referenced when you do your migration upgrade. You need to deploy 64-bit capable hardware. It is a must-have for 2010. Identify a migration path to 64-bit. If you're in 32-bit and you've got a heavy user base that are using your current environment, you need to make sure that you can minimize your downtime when you do your migration. And also you might want to review your future requirements so that when you make those decisions, you can actually start from a small farm and then grow into a larger farm, and how do you affect those decisions, and what do you need to factor in and so forth. So if you're planning to upgrade, whether you're in 32-bit or 64-bit or whatever situation you may be, you need to conduct an audit of your current environment, because the more you know about your farm, the better it will help you once you get into the when you actually do the migration, right? So you need to when you do your audit, you do a server audit. How many servers have you got? Are you a medium farm? Have you got 2 web front ends? Are they load balanced? Have you got app server? How are you using that? How many web applications have you got spread across your front end here? Databases, how many databases have you got? Have you got enough capacity if you're going to go to 2008? SQL, and what updates have you installed? Solution files, custom code, site collections, and another gotcha is that if you actually bought third-party products that integrate with SharePoint, if those products are not upgradable, your upgrade path may hinder on the time that those products are upgraded. So the more you know, the better it is that you are. And then once you got that, you can document your farm configuration. So I got this slide from Sean Livingston, who's one of the IT Pro guys, one of the product managers back in Redmond, where he spoke at the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas around how the upgrade review cycle should be. So you learn as much as you can about your farm, prepare, test. You need to test with real data. You can't test with, so basically you need to actually take backups or migrate your actual production data into a virtual farm or a physical farm, however you may find it, and test that as much as you can. Then start building your migration plan. You might encounter user experience UI issues. So when you migrated to 2010, they've actually allowed you to stay in the 2007 UI for a period of time until your users are savvy with the 2010 UI. So because there's a quite vast difference between the UIs as well, yeah? So how do you do an audit on a SharePoint farm? Yeah, there's quite a lot of tools available. Well, my favorite is STS-ADM or PowerShell. Choose either or. Admin toolkit using SPDiag. You can collect quite a lot of data with SPDiag. For the SharePoint newbie, you can just navigate through the central admin GUI and figure out what's in your farm. There's quite a lot of data you can gather just by looking at the GUI of central administration. And SharePoint Manager, that's a third, kind of like a shared source product or a downloadable that's available on Codeplex. It's a quite powerful tool. Just my advice is don't put it on production farms, put it on a test farm, and because if you don't know how to use it, you can do quite a bit of damage onto your farm. So just be aware of that. If you're going to use that, make sure you know actually what you're doing. So let's do an audit. So let me just switch to my demo machine. There's going to be a bit of throw and fro going from here, one machine to the other. So I'm using trusty virtual PC. So I've got it's a single server. All I'm going to illustrate is what can you audit, what tools can you use to audit, a few things. So I've got a single serve machine which is running everything in one box. And obviously you can navigate through the CA or UI and you can figure out which version of SharePoint I'm running. So 6520, that's Service Pack 2 plus some of the updates. So that's the place where you can find out the SKU of your SharePoint deployment, right? Quite easy to find out. And then you can see what services are running and then so on and so forth. So, and also when you go to application management, you can click on web application list and then you can see a whole lot of web apps that's running on this SharePoint farm. Yeah, well, farm, single machine, but yeah. So and I've got a site that is about 11 gig of data, standard SharePoint site, and this I'm going to run some checks against this and show the output of that as well. So one of the tools that you can use with doing an audit is you can use a command called pre-upgrade check, which essentially means that it's going to go through and check your content database for or actually your farm for what your status is for your farm for migration and so forth, right? So I won't run that now. I'm going to run a command called enum all webs, which essentially means that it's going to go through and then give you a report of all the information about the databases, sites, and everything regarding with your farm. So if I run that, it's going to go through. So you can see the parameters of that command. So then you can see it's going to go through and run through and give you a whole lot of reports. So what you can do is you can actually output that report into an XML file and have a look at it, and then you can see the different information about certain sites and so forth. So you can see that there's a database or a database called WSS Content Hour Space, which has 16 subsites or webs, and what template they're using, and so on and so forth. And then there's another one which is the larger database, which has got 14 sites, essentially meaning site collections. And then it shows you what it's got, and then the feature IDs and so on and so forth as well. Yeah. So the other one that you can do is so another quite handy one is if you want to look at how many databases a single web app is using, you can run STSADM enum content DB, so you can get the database names. So this one, the intranet web app, is actually has got 4 databases attached to it to move your site, so you can get that data out of that. And the other quite handy tool you can use is the SP Diag tool. So let me just run that. SharePoint Admin Toolkit. So SharePoint Diagnostics, which is a downloadable extra. So it basically you can install that, and it can collect quite a lot of data from your farm. So I've created this project. So I'm just going to go open project, which is list of projects. So this demo upgrade project. So essentially, SharePoint Diagnostic is a client-side tool that you can install on your farm, and then you can get statistics of what your farm is doing, and you can actually get real-time data as well using this tool. So when you create a project, what it does is it actually creates a SQL database in your SharePoint environment or wherever your SharePoint SQL database is. So I'm going to open that, and so it's going to give me a whole lot of information. So I can see all my web applications of that farm. So I can look at the demo upgrade. So I can see, so let me go update the root. So it gives you all of this information. So I can see now too many updates is running, please wait. So that's pretty much, you can see my SQL, and then you can go through the actual server and then see what the role is. So it's an application server. and I can see the build number, where the IIS logs are, ULS log files. So IIS logs are quite helpful when you're doing troubleshooting and so forth. Web config files, so where the web config files for each of these web apps are, and what the application pools are, what accounts the application pools are using, and so on and so forth as well. And then on the diagnostics tab, I can go and select for performance. I can say, so if I can say, if I was going to do kind of a best practice kind of audit, I can see which accounts are being used, if an account has been used in multiple locations, if it's not kind of doing best practice kind of scenario, I can go and see, and it's coming and saying, telling that SVC most farm DB account is actually used by another service, which shouldn't be. So those kind of scenarios, you can find out insights about your SharePoint deployment by using this tool quite a bit. And then there's trends as well on how you're performing. So you can actually go through. I'm not going to run this because this is going to actually bring the whole machine to a halt. Tried to run it just before and it just crashed. So I can go and capture live what's actually happening. So if you've got a live database, you want to pull and see how your trends are and so forth, you can capture this data live. So let's say no. Let me just go back. Actually, before that, I'll show you SP Manager as well, SharePoint Manager. There you go. So SharePoint Manager, again, gives you a whole lot of information, same as the SP Diag tool. And it's quite handy for developers as well. If you're developers among you, you can get quite a bit of insight about your SharePoint farm. You can see the quarter templates and all of the sites, sub-sites, all the data related to the sites. So I get access to United Errors because that site doesn't have any links. And so you get a lot of information from there as well. You can then document this and see what your farm status is and so forth. Yeah. So we kind of went through that. So again, the upgrade is supported from Service Pack 2 onwards. So your 2007 farm, if you're on 64-bit, if you want to go to 2010, has to be on Service Pack 2. So you need to then apply Service Pack 2 update to be able to be ready for 2010 as well. So we'll talk about how you go about deploying the 64-bit capable hardware. So if you're moving from 32 to 64-bit, what do you do? So you can actually move your tiers. So for example, you need to find out, so you can't mix, say, you want to put one web front end as, if you got two web front ends, you can't make one 64 and the other one 32-bit. You have to go for one tier. So if you say, for example, you can make your app server 64-bit and then still keep your web front ends 32-bit until such time you want to move. So you can't mix and match. You need to kind of identify which tier you need to go to. So there's, I kind of call this the 3-tier approach, which essentially means that the phase 1 of your upgrade method would be moving all of your SQL tier to 64-bit, right? And then tier B would be moving your app servers to 64-bit. So that means building up an OS and getting SharePoint installed, 64-bit installed, and then moving all of your shared service providers, search indexes, and so on and so forth into that tier. So once you move your databases, then you'd have a scenario where your SQL tier, your database tier, is actually connecting to a 32-bit environment. So this is a gradual way of getting from 32 to 64-bit without having to take all of your sites down and what have you. So So obviously, first thing you need to do is get your 64-bit hardware in ordered and get that provisioned and so forth. So Server 2008, if you can go with R2, go with R2, and so forth. And apply service updates. So the best practice around applying service updates, even for your OS level, is to make sure that they are part of group policy, so that when one server gets updated, all the servers get updated and so forth. So you can use things like System Center, Operations Manager to keep all of that in sync and what have you. So basically, you've got a 32-bit SQL environment. Prepare your SQL Server to 2008, and then start moving the databases across. So the database that you can move is your SSPs, search, content. You can do your central admin content database provided that you're using a DNS entry for your SQL. That's one of the best practices when you're building your farm. Make sure that you've got a DNS entry for your SQL Server or a cluster entry for your SQL Server rather than having a named FQDN, which helps longer term. So that's kind of like the SharePoint GUI for backing up. So you can do a SharePoint backup of all of your databases, your SSPs, and so on and so forth before you actually do the database move. So if you're moving from different names to different names, you can run the command called adm rename server to prepare your database and then move it across. Especially important for content databases. So when you're moving the databases, the steps you want to go through is make sure that all connections to the database is stopped. Essentially meaning you stop your 32-bit app server and your web front-end tier entirely. So you need to actually plan for downtime so that when people go to them, obviously you schedule this for the weekend or something like that, depending on what your service availability with your SharePoint farm is. So you can basically stop IIS, stop all the web applications, stop everything, and then obviously there's nothing connecting your timer services and all sort of stuff, and then you move all of your databases into the 2008 SQL 64-bit environment, and then you can start restarting once you you can detach all the databases from the 32-bit environment, attach it into SQL using SQL DB attach. Your MDF files and your log files and so forth, you can just move them across and then attach them, and then restart the farm to bring it back online. So when you're backing up the SSP, make sure that you can go to STS-ADM and then figure out the databases attached with that SSP to be backed up and so on and so forth as well. And then when you got a lot of content databases, you may have hundreds of content databases. You can run a batch script to back up all the content databases. And then you can restore the SSP, or you can do it via STS-ADM as well. So when you've done tier A, what essentially looks like is that you've got your SQL connecting to your 32-bit app server and your 32-bit web front-end tier. So now you've moved SQL, so you've got a 64-bit SQL environment now, and now you can plan how you're going to move your app tier application server to 64-bit. So one of the things when you do the 32-bit SQL to 64-bit, obviously, is making sure your backups are all up to date. And if you are, for example, another optional way of doing it actually is bringing up a SQL 2008 environment and then doing a log ship, and then stopping the log shipping, and then you've actually got a database set up that you can actually connect to directly. So that's another optional way of doing it as well. So obviously, when you're doing SQL, one of the things that I kind of sometimes find is that you've got your temp databases in the C drive, and so on and so forth. So make sure that you actually follow SQL best practices when you're deploying SQL as well, because SQL is always going to be a big bottleneck for SharePoint. From your IO counts and data and log locations and data file growth and so on and so forth. So that's completed. Now the next plan is to go with the tier B. So again, this is the app server. You may have more than one app server, load balance and so forth. You obviously need to kind of plan for those kind of scenarios as well, how you redirect your load balances and so forth. Prepare your farm, apply updates, install SharePoint 64-bit version with SP2 onto farm B, which you could have done in the previous step. You could have brought this whole thing up and then had it standby, just done the databases and then started doing this gradually. So if you're doing, because I did talk back in 2009 at TechEd, at that time you didn't have these SP2000 plus SP2 binary. You can actually now download the SharePoint 2007 plus SP2 binary directly from the download site on MSDN. You don't have to go through and download these ones. But if you are still not upgraded or updated to Service Pack 1 or Service Pack 2, you will have to download the service packs individually and then apply them. So again, document your test, document and test it on a test environment, all the steps that you need to follow when you're doing the app tier. So you could start putting the web frontends online as well. So one thing you need to do is basically go to the 32-bit farm, delete the SSPs because you already got the SSPs backed up and everything. Stop the farm again, same procedure as previously, stop all the services. And then move the F4, copy all the elements. So this is one of the things where you need to be careful is that you have got all the solution files of any custom code. So in your audit, you may find out all the custom solutions. So the WSPs that developers has built for web parts or custom controls for your SharePoint environment. Make sure that you've got all of these deployed already onto your 64-bit app server before you do this step. And then you should, if you've got custom code, features have been activated and so on and so forth. Then start the server up and then restore the SSP, restart the farm, and then you get kind of this kind of scenario where now you've got your app server, which is 64-bit, and it's now connected to your 32-bit front-end tier, right? So that's kind of like a gradual way of migrating. So you're halfway there, kind of thing. So the last bit of putting the web front ends is pretty straightforward. Again, do your OSs, install your service packs, and and get SharePoint up to the same level as your app server. So make sure that when you built your app tier, you essentially has the same replica build for your web front ends as well. And then you start adding them. So stop the farm base, essentially meaning you're going to stop the two front-end services, connect and add the SP Web 1 and Web 2 service to farm B. And if everything you've done has been tested and so forth, it should work. So then you kind of now moved from a 32-bit into a 64-bit environment. Everything's ready. So now what you can do is now start further testing whether the 64-bit farm, which is SharePoint 2007, can now get upgraded to 2010. So you've got a farm which has got Server 2008 and it's on 64-bit, but you're not on Service Pack 2 because Service Pack 2 is a prereq for going to 2010, right? So how do you apply Service Pack 2? So one of the things that a lot of people haven't done. Who's on Service Pack 2 at the moment? Most people, yeah. So one of the methods that I kind of say to minimize downtime around applying service pack is basically you obviously have a downtime window for your apps and your content databases and so forth. So what I typically do is I go and stop all the, once I've done my tests and everything that I've gone through my test environment and my pre-production environment, that everything is okay in terms of applying service updates. Detach all of the content databases. So get a list of all of your content databases, detach them from your web apps, right? Before you apply your service packs, detach them, install the WSS upgrade. Don't run the config wizard. So the config wizard is what it does is it goes and upgrades each of the databases. So install WSS. If it's obviously I'm talking about a MOS farm. Install the SharePoint upgrade package. So it's always WSS first, SharePoint second, and then run the config wizard, right? So at this point in time, all you're updating is central admin, the binaries, and that's about it. And then run the config wizard. So the amount of time it will take for an upgrade to complete is relative to the size of your content database, because it goes through each content database and updates the schema version. So what you now do is start attach each of the content databases manually by using stcadm add content db, so that it updates, and then you can bring each web app online as you go through that. So that's a quite easy and quick way, or a better way of making sure you can upgrade seamlessly from service pack to service pack, or cumulative update to cumulative update. So we look at the upgrade checker and what it does. So with Service Pack 2 and the other updates, you get a command called stsadm pre-upgrade check, and also the other one that I showed you previously, enum all webs. So there are two configuration files that you can use for when you're doing the upgrades. The WSS pre-upgrade check, which you can use rules to check certain things and so forth, and whether when you need to, if you got custom site definitions, how to look for the site definitions and what parameters to use and so on and so forth. So let's go and run that command to see what that output is. So what it's doing is actually, all it does is it goes through your farm and then figures out whether your farm is actually in an upgradable state, and it actually provides you with a whole lot of really good data where you need to go through and then figure out, okay, have I got custom solutions that I need to upgrade? Have I got orphan sites? So orphan sites are when your database gets corrupted. So there are commands in STSAD that you can run against your database. Are there sites that are not being used, and so on and so forth. So you've got quite a lot of information that you can gather from that report. So let that run in the background. Let me just see if I've got a report that I've already previously created. There you go, it's coming along. So it automatically says in there on the top, they said OS prerequisite failed because I'm running a 32-bit SharePoint 2003 machine. So obviously says no, can't be done. And even says there's server configuration errors. There's a failure there, and you can also see that unsupported SQL version That means that I can't actually move my SQL tier as well because it's running on 2003 server, 2005 pre-SP3. So essentially, the ones highlighted in information only gives you, so there you go. So it gives you that report and say there's some potential upgrade blocking issues. There's some server file or server config issues and a whole lot of data that you can look at and then decipher based on. So again, it says there's a whole bunch of features that are being referenced by the webs and they're not on the server and they're missing. So those are potential issues that you might encounter when you're going to do the upgrade. So it gives you quite a good background on where to look and how to fix up your environment. So it says so there's some site definition information as well, which ones are installed, and then it says a whole lot of stuff that's missing, feature information. And some web part information and so forth as well. And it gives you information about large lists items. So for example, there's a couple of lists and libraries that contain 7,000 and 6,000 and 5,000 list items. So it gives you that information as well. And it says now so these fields are not going to be upgraded and information like that. So you can then pass on this information back to developers and say, look, you need to fix your code or you need to fix these definitions and so on and so forth. Then you can share that information with them. It gives you information about your file indexes and so on and so forth as well. So it's a helpful way of figuring out an inside of your farm before you do an upgrade. Yeah. So we looked at that. So there's some supporting information for developers around how to migrate your code, and there's a talk, I believe. Is that you, Tobias, who's doing the talk on the upgrading code to 2010? No, yeah. So there's another talk around upgrading code from 2007 to 2010 compatibility. So there's a whole lot of information obviously now becoming available, obviously with the product going RTM, and hopefully you'll have lots more information coming through and you'll be able to download 2010 RTM. If not, I think the beta is a lot of people have downloaded the beta and then played around with it. So in the next one, what we're going to do is we're going to do a in-place and a DB attach of a farm. These are the two kind of methods that you can use, or the recommended methods. So Microsoft has done quite a lot of investment in the upgrade area because getting from 2003 to 2007 was quite a bit of effort and pain. So they've gone and said, okay, we're going to give you two methods of upgrade, or you could use a hybrid of these approaches. So in-place upgrade essentially means you're going to install 2010 on top of your 2007 environment, and you won't be able to use the sites until that's been upgraded. And they also provided a few extra features around how to redirect users based on where they're coming from and so forth until the upgrade is finished. And then there's the DB attach method, which is kind of my favorite one because it is much more cleaner and much more effective when you're doing large sites, migrations or updates. So now a bit early. Questions? Yep.
How do you
So you're talking about like,
In your
yep,
grid, SDS,
yeah,
it showed lots of missing
files, yeah,
site templates.
yeah.
How do you track down what they are? How do I fix them?
You need to look at your 12 Hive and figure out what those solution files are, if they are missing.
But I mean in the report,
Yeah,
it says unknown.
yeah,
Other features that just give you the grid.
yeah. Well, it's one of those things that you kind of need to go through and do a bit more validation around. So that's why you need to get your production data and then test it. And in my system, you would get that because I'm actually using a custom database that's not even there. Well, some of the solution files are not actually there. I've attached the database. But you should, once you do your audit, once you've done your audit, you'd have a good understanding. For example, if it says it's missing a file for a solution or a feature, you can see as part of your audit, have you identified what features are. So if you deployed a feature, for example, and then in your report it comes as missing, then you can say, okay, I haven't found it on my, so therefore you can start digging a little bit more deeper. Or you can use tools like Beyond Compare to see your 12 Hive to see what files are actually missing against a actual deployment. So you might add sometimes when you do solution deployments and remove solutions, inadvertently without you knowing, some of the files might be removed, but the system will have some empty references. You can actually go and clean those up as well. So it's a trial and error thing. Upgrade is always going to be a trial and error thing where you need to go and figure out, okay, what can we move on without having too much of an issue. And sometimes it does give you false positives as well. So that's something you need to be aware of as well.
Well, assuming that you're working with solutions, features and solution sets, you're not supposed to miss so many files. It was on a demo server. But if on a production farm you have so many files missing, then you have a big issue, bigger than the upgrade that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So basically, if you have so many files missing, it's because you want to remove file module not using solutions. So you're already on the bad side.
But I also know that you get a similar report if you take your production database and copy it down to a test environment and run it in there. So my question was, if I do that, how do I track down what's missing?
Hold on a second.
All I get is a grid. You know, just the same way as you can attach your MOS content database to a WSS file, and it will report a grid, but it doesn't tell you it's a publishing feature that's missing.
So these ones that are missing are actually part of the database that I copied has got the Fantastic 40 templates there, right? So, but I haven't got them installed here. So that's why a lot of the missing information is coming from. So there's like 30 or 40 sites in that database that are referencing those Fantastic 40 templates. So if you can't find that reference, it'll say you can't find it. So for example, if that was found, it'll say it's installed, but I can't find because all I'm getting is a GUID. I mean, again, it's an internal thing within SharePoint. It references the GUID plus the name. So if you can't find the name, it's going to go, I don't know what it is. So if you do get that kind of report in your production farm, because essentially if you've got a pre-production environment that doesn't necessarily mirror what's in production, what you might need to do is actually make sure that it's a matching replica of your production farm as much as you can. And how you can go through and figure out which files am I missing, you can use it to, like I said, WinCompare or WinDiff to see on your 12 Hive and your actual program files, common shared files instance, where those site templates, site definitions and everything are referencing, and how do I kind of make a contrast between those two. So again, like Christian said, if you are having issues around, I don't know which file it is in your production environment, and if you can't actually find that in your dev stage and so on, then that is a concern. Its upgrade is one of those things that it's always you can mitigate as much as you can, but sometimes you need to kind of figure out, okay, what's the best way to move forward, and then ignore those errors and then move on. so that you've got the majority of the core functionality set up and upgraded and so forth.
If you are using System Center already, what I recommend you is to use VMM and to virtualize your physical environment, so you're sure that you have the exact copy of your production farm, and do your test on the virtual machine on the Hyper-V. And this is probably the easiest way. And you get an exact copy of VMM. It's going to take less than 1 hour to copy your farm, to create your farm, running on the Hyper-V. This is probably the easiest way.
Yeah. Thanks, Christian. Questions, any? Any special requests for the next session? We've got a day to sort out what we're going to show. If you're going to be at the next session.
Are there any special requirements in terms of a load balance front end? Anything else we need to worry about if we were doing an in-place upgrade?
If you are going to be doing in-place upgrade, yeah, you do need to figure, okay, if you've got load balance service and so forth, there are provisions for doing that kind of scenarios. What I would suggest is actually have a downtime for the load, remove it from the load balancing, and then upgrade and then set up the load, because load balancing won't essentially affect anything. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I always kind of try and take away all the external things that might be an obstruction to that kind of thing. So make sure you got that core upgraded. Yes.
In terms of migration, because it's going to be new set of hardware requirements, you'll always do a brand new environment for 2010, unless you just happen to be lucky that you have the hardware. So in which case, you will still not do an in-place upgrade, but you'll actually do an attach. You will never, but very rarely you'll do in-place. But I've never heard of anybody doing in-place 2003 to 2007. Everybody did gradual migration or attachment. Sure. So even in 2010, I expect the same. Like, I think very rarely you'll do an in-place upgrade. You'll always do an attach.
Yeah. I mean, in-place upgrades are good if you actually exactly know that you haven't done nothing out of the ordinary and you only got a very standard SharePoint environment. Then until you've done your audit. I mean, it's surprising how much information you find about your farm, because over the course of time, once you've installed it and to the point that you are today, a lot of things would have changed. So doing your audit and finding out about what your farm actually does and what it is that you've got in your farm is quite important. And doing that audit is going to definitely save you bacon in the long term. So, and then have simple things like making sure that your SQL environments are set up. Like I said, it's quite surprising that how many people actually still put SQL temp DB on the C drive and then suddenly realize, oh, I'm running out of space. So those kind of things are quite important, quite crucial. Any questions? Cool. Thank you. Enjoy the party. Yes.